Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. Welcome to our seminar on creative experience in the age of COVID-19. I'm Pat, I'm the Chief Solutions Officer for the Dentsu Creative line of business, and I'm joined today by my colleague Dave, who's the Chief Innovation Officer for Isobar globally. What we're going to cover today is the rise of what we call creative experience, and some findings from our CMO survey on that. We'll talk about the four forces that are disrupting customer experience in the age of COVID, four key strategies to help brands navigate that landscape, and then of course we'll take questions from yourselves. So what do we mean by creative experience and the rise of creative experience? How we define that at Isobar is a new approach to customer experience that's focused not just on eliminating and removing pain points, but on engineering delight and building brands. And creative experiences are of course made possible by technology, and they're made personal and relevant and meaningful by data, but really importantly, they're made powerful through big organizing brand ideas. So if we think about the first wave of customer experience as being very much focused on eliminating friction and on best practice, demand generation, optimization, the perfect checkout, the perfect form fill. All those things are still really important. We're not walking away from those, but we now see a second wave, which is very much about creative experience. It is about engineering delight. It's about brand practice and desire generation, and it's got innovation very much at the heart. So what did we learn from our CMO study about the rise of creative experience? First thing we saw is that there have been huge changes in the field of CX in response to COVID. 1 in 5 CMOs say their approach has changed completely. 64% say their approach has changed completely or somewhat. And we see some real variation across sectors for sure. So that rises to 1 in 3 CMOs in the tech sector who say their strategy has completely changed. And it's a little bit lower in sectors like media, entertainment, and leisure. And an interesting piece of analysis we did, and one always has to be careful, correlation isn't causation, but what we did see is that those industries who have been most profoundly affected by COVID, who are most likely to say it's an existential threat to their business, are the least likely to be adapting and changing their customer experience strategy right now. And of course, those businesses are leaning into terrible headwinds, incredible volatility. It's not surprising they don't have the bandwidth to pivot, but it's an interesting observation nevertheless. So on the whole, we see some really significant changes in how businesses are approaching customer experience. And that's not surprising when we think about how fundamentally all of our lives have changed and all the experiences that we have every day have changed.
As it relates specifically to COVID, there's been a lot of interesting acceleration of innovative technologies that did exist, but that are now being repurposed for better customer experiences and keeping businesses open in a time when separation of individuals is more important than ever, because it wasn't necessarily important to us before. We always wanted to bring people together. Now we need to provide accommodations and services, but keep our distance. And so the first example of this is something that out of Singapore, but also piloted by both Hilton and Marriott, which is a Dentsu client, around robot room service. So these devices existed prior to COVID. They were gimmicks, and people could order a water and have it delivered to the room. We tried to use operational efficiency as the driver behind this, and now there is actually a necessity. And so it's the first example we'll share today of where innovation went from an existing, potentially failing technology into something that's relevant for our everyday. Moving along, we also talk about temperature scanning. This is not a new technology. We've seen this in baby monitors and baby and children's devices. We also see this in things like the construction industry with laser-based temperature scanning. And now we've turned that around on human beings so that we can gauge remotely one's temperature and health. Contactless check-in, obviously something that has existed. Now we're even moving beyond just touching the screen, right? So we'll talk a little bit about new flavors of technology that aid navigation in these kinds of devices. But this is an example of where I can now use mobile devices in conjunction with a kiosk for that check-in experience. We look at what Burger King is doing and others following suit with like the concept of the triple drive-through. So extending drive-through services rather than in-restaurant services to create more volume through drive-through lanes. Next, we talk about QR codes. I had a great experience recently at a restaurant where I sat down, scanned a QR code on the table, was able to access the full menu, order, and pay directly from the app, never even having to have that order experience with the server. Rather, just the food was delivered to the table, which was a great experience.
So there's no doubt that we're all seeing huge change, and it's no surprise that CMOs are responding. What is really surprising is how they're responding. So in a crisis, you might expect people to become more conservative and to really double down on efficiency and optimization. In fact, what we're seeing is that CMOs are doubling down on innovation in response to this crisis. So investing in innovation is the single most adopted strategies across all businesses of every size. So of course there are other levers, but absolutely innovation, diversifying their offering, diversifying their route to market is the most pursued strategy. And when we ask what CMOs need from their agencies to deliver those superior CX experiences, again, it's absolutely about creative ideation, innovation, and the ability to invent and concept new products and services. Building on that theme, we also asked CMOs, what makes, in your opinion, for a compelling and differentiated customer experience? And again, we saw innovation and ideas absolutely at the core. So personalization, yes, of course, also comes through strongly. And we see some interesting differences there. So personalization is the top measure overall, but among CMOs of large businesses and leading edge businesses, it's dropping back a little bit versus innovation. So some interesting changes there. We also see some interesting differences across sectors. So for example, we see that sectors like technology and energy are less likely to prioritize personalization versus businesses that are perhaps a little bit earlier on their digital transformation journey. So we see some differences and we see some interesting patterns, but the thing that jumped out at us most is that a galvanizing organizing idea is the single criteria showing the most significant growth year on year. When CMOs are asked what makes a compelling, differentiated customer experience, they are much, much more likely in 2020 to say it's the power of the idea. That's up 19 percentage points. So that's a really profound shift. So we asked ourselves, why might that be? Because, you know, we are in a time when people are scared and people tend to be conservative and they tend to be risk averse when they're scared, but not so much. And we've identified 4 key reasons and factors why we think CMOs are doubling down on creative experience at this point in our history. First factor is that brands today are much more than what they say. Brands are what they do. They're built through behavior, they're built through experience. The second factor is that the age of COVID has, as Dave touched on with those examples, completely flipped the role of online and offline experiences. It's turned those on their head. Third factor we see is the rise of what we call experience technology. So a whole suite of new technologies from VR, Internet of Things, augmented reality, voice, that enable genuinely distinctive and brand building experiences. And the fourth factor we see that's probably the most profound and ties all those other threads together is the role of the CMO today in aligning brand and experience within their organizations as never before. So what do we mean when we say brands are what they do? We've known this for a while, that you can't say one thing and do another. We live in an age of total transparency, but that, like so many other things, has been accelerated by COVID. And in a post-COVID world, brands are built through authentic action. So CMOs know and firmly believe that consumers want to see them do the right thing by their employees and by their customers before anything else. It starts with authentic action and making a genuine contribution. And of course, in the post-funnel world that we live in, we also find that brands are built through timely and relevant interaction. So Google had this lovely expression, the messy middle. Brands today are built in the messy middle, in all these complex, messy user journeys. And we've got to show up consistently and distinctively in that space. So any misalignment between what your brand says and what your brand does, between brand and experience, erodes brands, and it damages businesses and damages reputations. But all too often, online experiences aren't really fit for purpose when it comes to building brand and building ideas and differentiation. And Jay from Forrester sums this up brilliantly with a brilliantly punchy quote where he talks about the issue is that the work looks, feels, and behaves too similar. This obsession with meeting every customer need and want by using technology has left little room for creative differentiation. So we've got to put the creativity back in, we've got to put the brand back into experience. The other reason we need to do that is this transformation in the role of online versus offline. So I don't know about you, but I can't remember the last time I browsed. I can't remember the last time I went window shopping. I tried on a dress or I tried on a lipstick. You know, those days feel like they're long gone. You know, Fast Company talk about the days of lazily strolling through a store, or on the BBC ask if we're ever going to browse again. So the role of bricks and mortar has really been transformed, and we see a host of new store formats developing to combat that. So we see headlines about Walmart and Starbucks, Burger King, all designing store formats designed to minimize dwell time, minimize friction, as Dave said, to stop you from coming into contact with people. And you know, if we told anyone 12 months, 18 months ago, the brand to be actively trying to reduce the time you spend in a store, reduce the contact, you'd have thought, but that's where we are right now. And we have some data from McKinsey. It's the only data in the whole report that doesn't come from my study, but it's interesting data, and it builds on this point about the role of the store being increasingly a point of transaction and a point of fulfillment rather than a point of discovery and serendipity. So we see a real growth in behaviors like self-checkout, curbside pickup, buy online, pickup in store, all these technologies that create a distance and a kind of remoteness to the in-store experience. Our own data bears that out. We see a really increased focus in direct-to-consumer approaches and in commerce among clients across every vertical. And the really interesting thing here is, if you've worked in this sector for a while, is that we used to think about online as the destination that was all about transaction and efficiency and frictionless fulfillment. And offline, we would say that's where you build brand experience, and that's where you deliver discovery and serendipity. And any article about, you know, the high street over the last kind of 2 years would have absolutely talked about the physical store as the destination to build brand experience. And now, in a heartbeat, those things really have been turned on their head, and that's a fascinating place to be, and that transition is happening at speed and at pace. So this is a quote from Joseph Ling, who's the CEO of Vouch, which is a virtual concierge service for hotels, and he talks about pre-COVID, our sales cycle was 6 months to a year. Now 2 weeks is enough time for us to go right the way up to the CEO and get that contract signed off and start enabling that piece of technology, because the pace of transformation is so accelerated and so acute these days. And that's something we're helping a number of our clients with as well.
We talk about one example of this, the work we've done with KFC in China. As everyone knows, right, the first country to be severely impacted by the coronavirus was China, and our team worked with KFC to go ahead and advance the slide if you could, Pat. to create a contactless delivery and in-store ordering solution, which quickly evolved into more ideas around how we can solve additional problems around the customer restaurant experience. People still needed to eat. People still love their KFC, and they wanted to find new ways to expand upon the success of contactless in-store ordering, right? So being scanned, temperature scanned as you walked into a store, and keeping your distance as you both order and then receive your meal. That turned into both a contactless delivery service where they could leave your meal outside and use a mobile device between you and the delivery mechanism to get your food, still keeping your distance. And then extending that even further to an enterprise app that allowed communities to coordinate deliveries together to optimize both traffic flow and the fact that a delivery driver can't cover that much ground. There is a lot of ground to cover, for example, in Shanghai. And then also places like hospital deliveries, prioritizing those deliveries for frontline workers over regular consumers. And then obviously along the whole way, taking that real-time temperature data. What I think is also interesting is in a future world, this is showing that enterprise mobile app for community delivery. I think it's fascinating when you start to look at the data capture that you can do in the course of doing the service, right? So now we are understanding potentially where hotspots are. And so in the future, there will probably be options for private sector to work with public sector to then help source data so that we can understand what's happening on the street a little bit more with more fidelity. Keep moving forward. And I think it's important to say, you know, we've had a lot of success with KFC from building the KFC Pocket Store, which was an award-winning piece of work that extended the ability to order food through the user community. But the relationship that brands have with their agencies is built on trust and on success. And the trust and success that we've had with that client in previous endeavors where we mix emerging technologies with problems to create new business opportunities allowed us to get to market quick. And part of the story here is not just the solutions, but the speed to market to get those solutions deployed, because every day, every minute counts when you're talking about a crisis like what we've been encountering. Want to talk a little bit about how experience technology becomes this new creative toolkit. Moving forward, there's no longer enough for us as creatives and for idea people to live in a world separated from technology. There are a host of new technologies that have opened up so many new opportunities to create experiences that are distinctive, delightful, and disarmingly human. And we talk about humans, so let's talk first about some human interfaces like voice. We're seeing obviously more growth with voice appliances for home from our friends at Amazon, Google, and other vendors. Gesture control, I mentioned that check-in experience. We're seeing more need to create machines that can see us, talk to us, and hear us, right? We combine that with IoT solutions. Pat, can you go back to the previous slide? Sorry, really quick. I just want to talk to a couple of these. We talk about IoT, right? Is really the idea of connecting all of these things together, right? So that we can create those connected store experiences. And ultimately, when we start to move into a world where AR moves off of the mobile phone into headsets, like what Apple will launch next year, and even more immersive VR experiences, that gives us this new opportunity to not just use data in interesting ways, but in truly useful ways with contextualization, so that in a world 2 years out, we'll see augmented reality really be an augmented physicality. So data comes into our physical space and we move to this world, this future vision of like spatial computing. Moving forward, I think some of these data points are really interesting. So leading CMOs are rapidly adopting these technologies. The question posed was, which of these emerging technologies do you already use to deliver better customer experiences? Feels like these answers are pretty much in line with what your expectations would be. AI, a blanket over all of these types of new experiences, is used by almost all brands in some way. But from a marketing and experience perspective, we see AI kind of as a leader. Then moving to voice chatbots, VR, Machine learning, I think, is probably a little bit of a misunderstanding on the CMO's perspective, because most AI is powered by machine learning, right? So there's a correlation between those technologies, but maybe not mentally between the solutions that are bringing to market. And then followed up by AR, which we will probably see move to this left over the next year as leading brands do so and continue to prove the value of those types of experiences. And then things like headless commerce at the trail, but that could also be the fact that that's the direction commerce is moving, and maybe the CMO may not be aware of the power of something about being able to provide commerce experiences across the board, not just in the e-commerce site. Moving forward, we want to ask, disrupt or be disrupted. The CMOs that are least likely to have adopted emerging technologies are actually the most likely to say their business is facing existential impact from COVID. This makes complete sense, because over the last 9 months or so, there has been pulling of fire alarms in businesses across the world, where there's been a focus on keeping the lights on, right? Making sure that our customers are served, making sure that employees have jobs, and investment or thinking about disruption just hasn't been top of mind. The challenge with that, and like the challenge in any down economy or troubled economic environment, is that when you pull back from innovation and pull back from even disrupting yourself, you start to stall, and then you can't catch up. And so you end up into this loop of, well, I didn't innovate, and I don't have any ability to innovate. And so we want to make sure that brands understand that keeping the lights on the innovation torch is probably pretty important if you want to continue this pace once COVID leaves us or diminishes and the economy improves. Moving forward, adoption is high among technologies offering a more human and conversational approach. So we're talking particularly around voice and chat bots. It's interesting to see that the more high touch, the more relationship that brand has with that consumer, and the more that there's more competition for experience. If we look all the way to right, media and entertainment companies probably would still be making films and focusing on movie theaters if it weren't for the likes of tech companies like Netflix and Amazon that have pushed that industry forward. So there's very little innovation investment in some of these more traditional businesses, but obviously a lot of that is being rethought. And when they can dabble in new technologies like voice and chatbots that are low risk and high impact for consumers, it's a good place to prove things like that out. Stepping forward, these technologies that blur the boundaries between online and offline spaces become really interesting, particularly with certain brands or companies in industries and sectors like telecom and automotive, financial and insurance. I cannot meet my financial advisor in person. I still need to plan for my family's future. And so now I can use robust, interactive, collaborative online tools for a one-to-one relationship while I'm not in a one-to-one physical experience with customers. Moving forward, one more, we talk about physical stores. They're constrained, and these online experiences become more innovative and expressive in terms of virtual sampling, trials, consultations, test driving. And I'd love to talk to you about a couple really cool examples there, because these are starting to impact everyday users, no longer seen as emerging, but now are setting the bar for experience. So most new projects that we're moving forward on are tipping their hat to these. Go ahead, Pat. So the first is Modiface. So this is a true success story across the fashion and cosmetic luxury space, right? L'Oreal acquired a tech company called Modiface that made an augmented reality, for lack of a better term, makeup trial tool. I've used it. I look ridiculous with lipstick on, for the record, but it's a really great experience. It was really well created, and their acquisition has seen that product expand across their lines. Every time that you interact a digital experience with them, there's probably an option to interact with the Modiface platform to essentially virtually put cosmetics on and see how those things look for you. It's a great user experience, great piece of technology, and a great success story in cosmetic. If we talk about some great, exciting news over the last couple of weeks, Amazon Halo. So Amazon's moving forward into the health and wellness space. We all knew that was going to happen at some point, and here they are, a full salt on the competitors, capturing your data for wellness. But then what this means is that now that I understand you and your body and your activity, Amazon also sells things like clothes. And so we see this day where that activity and that measurement becomes a measurement of your physical appearance, your physicality. So not only for our vanity, for us to look nice, but also to make sure that we're healthy. And when we combine those two things together, we create all sorts of opportunities, not only to buy the things that will fit me and feel right on me, but that will make me look good, and then also keeping me in touch with myself and the way I should be from a health and wellness perspective. So that's fascinating. We see Warby Parker, right? Virtual eye try-on, eyewear try-on. We've seen attempts at this kind of stuff in the past. We're finally at a point where the technology has met the expectation of the user. So now we have web-based AR applications that are low friction. You don't need to download the app. You can launch them from a website address, a rich media ad served off of a media company like Google, or a QR code scan. Funny how QR codes are back into the picture after many years of trying to take flight. The work that Apple has done and Google to implement QR code reading right into your camera has really changed a lot of ability to interact with brands. If we talk about some of the work we've done, this is a fascinating case study, extending these online experiences to the extreme. So we're going to talk a little bit about Cadillac Live. What is Cadillac Live? We're talking about a platform that allows you as a consumer to come in, let's go ahead and move forward, to experience vehicles with a one-on-one sales experience, being able to customize and configure that car virtually, which is fascinating, right? This platform actually starts as a one-on-one personal shopper experience. So I can visit the salesperson live, they can walk around the vehicles, they can talk about features, and the idea here is to get people into a test drive. In the first 6 months, we had 450 completed user sessions with 19% booking this test drive, which is a much higher conversion rate than we would see in traditional auto shows. Everything in innovation has to start with improving, right? So we prove out that this works, and now we are moving forward into a more virtual environment to where I don't have to only show Cadillacs, I don't have to worry about just the cars I have in inventory in our studio, where we're showing this off using virtual 3D models and real-time ray tracing technologies. We can create photorealistic, indistinguishable from the physical object using digital models, and I can now take you through any car offered by GM. And that's a fascinating promise when we start to talk about high-touch sales experiences, everything from washers and dryers and home appliances to jewelry to vehicles. This is the future of how we will handle those sales in a remote world. Moving forward.
So incredible
yeah,
stuff.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about 4 key factors shaping the rise of creative experience, and Dave's talked brilliantly about the kind of technologies that enable that. We talked about some of the changes to the physical retail environment that are really necessitating some of those changes, but the most profound shift really is about the role of the CMO within the organization, and that ability and that imperative to really align brand and experience and bring creativity and technology together as they never have been before. So when we asked our CMOs what their role is, the primary role of marketing in their organization, new products and services, overall customer experience were really high on their agenda. So of course, it's all the classic remit of the CMO around driving growth, understanding the customer, but absolutely product innovation, customer experience are really high on their list of priorities. And when we asked about key KPIs, so what are you personally as a CMO held accountable for? Again, we see product and service innovation, we see delivery of digital transformation really edging up that agenda. So digital transformation up 9 percentage points on the previous year. And of course, there are a host of other metrics, but those things are becoming increasingly part of the day job for the CMOs we talk to, and that is driving that absolute integration of what the brand stands for and what the brand delivers day in, day out in the hands of its customers. And so we think this reflects both the heightened experience of a customer first approach for sure. So the CMO helps put the customer at the very beating heart of the organization, but it also highlights that need in the world of radical transparency that we live in for brands to really align brand and experience, belief and behavior, external statements, and internal values. So there has got to be that absolutely holistic approach to brand building, customer experience, employee experience. It all needs to spin off of the same organizing idea. So those were the 4 key factors that we see disrupting customer experience in the age of COVID. Brands are what they do, so adopting a creative experience mindset is absolutely critical. The role of online and offline have changed, so brands have got to embrace innovation to build resilience and business continuity and to build that seamless connectivity across online and offline. Experience technology bringing up this host of new possibilities to build delightful human experiences online in a contactless world. And critically, today's CMO really does unite brand and experience, and they will need to be informed by real-time data and a spirit of radical collaboration with their colleagues to make sure that consistency and that galvanizing brand purpose are married to a real agility and an ability to move at the pace of change. So the last section of our presentation was about, okay, with all that change that's happening in the world and all that opportunity and all that disruption, where do I start? How can I navigate all of that change? And we see 4 key ways, 4 key strategies to help find your way through this, and 4 key ways that, we can potentially help a little bit. So the first is change. We've probably said change already today. So, if you're playing a drinking game, that would be dangerous, but change is really important. Accelerating innovation to make sure you're delivering on your brand promise and you're responding to rapid changes in the market. Commerce, really investing in idea-led creative commerce to deliver a genuine brand experience online. Content, we forget sometimes the role of content in managing a customer experience along the path to purchase, accelerating it where it needs accelerating, providing information where that's needed. And the final piece is around culture, how we can help brands align what they believe and how they behave in the world as never before. Dave is going to talk about change.
So one of my favorite topics. The necessity to change now is greater than ever. Some of the work that we do across our global operations relates to innovation and this 3-pillared approach to invent, make, change. So we have 22 Now Lab innovation hubs across our global markets that help clients understand their business, right? Understand their customers and create new products and services, as well as potential delivery models like what we see with KFC in China, to address customer needs, those cultural headwinds and market forces. This invent, make, change mantra ensures agile and iterative approach to transformation, adopting the sprint and scale mindset. If we talk about invent first, we want to understand and identify the business, brand, and user objectives, as I mentioned, and then envision and architect the best solutions moving forward. If we talk about make, right, this is about using everything we know from the world of marketing, right, to create new products and services, craft and engineer high quality experiences, flawless design, and elegant writing that bring consumers and brands together. And now it's really interesting because there's a functional component to this, not just a brand experience component to this. And lastly, the change part, right? Where we're focused here, we advocate for the best experiences, uniting people, platforms, and processes together to enable growth. Right now, we want to see our clients not only survive, but grow through the situation that they are all in. If we talk about how we do that, right, this is an example of our Now Lab space in the Netherlands. This is a combined hybrid workshop studio ideation space. We have created our own methodology and design methods related to the design thinking frameworks that many of us are familiar with that really help extract the needs of customers, the needs of the business. And we have a really great unified process if we can move forward, that's really focused on inspiration, invention, and incubation. So at the highest level, right, inspire. So across the NILAB initiative, we do inspiration sessions that help provide our client teams with new insights, a bigger lens or an aperture around cultural, technological, and commercial context that's facing the business. These are quick, very highly collaborative and effective workshops that get things moving and help an organization understand where they should be focusing their innovation bets. Secondly, a little more robust, right, is the invention. This is where our design sprint programs work with our clients to engage teams in rapid prototyping, testing, and iteration. This is, like as I mentioned, our methodologies around workshops, design and development sprints, turning ideas into action. And we do that in partnership with our clients. And then last, and that has resulted in so many different amazing, interesting digital products and services that have been brought to market in a co-creation manner. And then third, incubation, right? We want to make innovation scalable for both employee adoption and engagement across different enterprises. I'm talking to various clients now. I'll show some client work in a second where this is profoundly impactful on an enterprise. But we engage these client teams in the sprint and scale programs, right? And creating innovation mindsets amongst people, bottom-up innovation. This is not about, hey, we meet with a C-level suite and we create an innovation program and it gets handed down to people. This is about engaging individuals the same way we engage their customers and consumers in the marketplace. We know how to do that inside an organization to create the most impact for innovation as those brands tackle tough problems like COVID. I'm going to talk a little bit about Cisco. I just mentioned that we are the marketing innovation AOR for Cisco. We work with an amazing team there led by our client, Devin Hood. An example of the work that we've created with them was to identify a need ahead of COVID. Can you believe that? For remote events. We've created a platform with them. Think first that Cisco Live, their flagship event of the year, has 80,000 in-person attendees and 400,000 online attendees. They were trying to find ways to scale that, to make that online experience as good as that personal in-person experience, and COVID hit. And so the thinking that we had around Cisco Live and the work that they're doing with their own remote events, but they have thousands of annual events, which translate into thousands of hours of archived event video. How do you make that more meaningful, more usable to people, more interactive, more collaborative? All of the things that we're trying to do in the customer world where we talked about like remote commerce, but we want to do that in a B2B context. And so understanding B2B the way we do and understanding human beings the way we do, we're able to engineer a platform. If you move to the next slide, you can see a much better visualization. Oh, sorry, my bad. But so the virtual experience hub is Cisco's virtual event platform. It's the first time that I can think of where a large major tech company has had a product designed by Marketing Insights. And it is going to market as such. Fantastic example of collaboration and real innovation and change inside an organization that is under constant change. So it's a fascinating thing to have worked on.
So the second C, the second strategy we encourage brands to really embrace at the moment is of course commerce. And across Dentsu we have what we call our total commerce platform that brings together our experts in data, creativity and technology to deliver those really holistic cross-channel experiences for our clients. And the role of Isobar within that and the creative line of business is really to bring that idea-led and creative lens to commerce, mindful of the way that the retail environment is changing and all the opportunities and all the imperatives that opens up for brands around new kinds of commerce technologies and experiences. So we love to think about a big omni-channel idea-led approach, but we also have a range of tools that can really help our clients get to market quickly in these incredibly volatile times, create new routes to market, protect the routes to market they have through things like fast track commerce, which can get brands live in the e-com space in as little as 45 days. We have a D2C Jumpstart program for packaged goods companies, helping them enter that space, understand what their strategy should be, think about how they take on some of the startup insurgents in that space. We advise brands on how to optimize their Amazon platform. And we also, as we showed with KFC, have real expertise now in curbside pickup platforms and getting those up and running at a pace to help brands navigate the extraordinary times we find ourselves in. And a brand that we've done that for successfully is Tivoli Gardens. Tivoli Gardens is one of the biggest attractions, theme parks in the Nordics. And we've done a long-standing digital transformation program with that to make that experience digitally enabled and delightful. And as COVID struck, they needed to find a way to safeguard their customers while still maintaining the delight and the charm and the joy of that experience. So very quickly, we were able to build a queuing functionality into their app that let guests know when there was time for them to enjoy the ride while still enjoying the rest of the theme park experience. So super quick to implement that and secure their business because we'd engaged on a long-standing program of digital transformation for them. But we can also help businesses go from 0 to 60 pretty quickly in this space. Our third C is content, and being a business that brings together creativity and technology, we recognize that timely and relevant content is just as critical an enabler of the customer experience in the path to purchase as technology. And we're able to help brands, again, respond at real pace we find ourselves in through our Content Symphony platform. Content Symphony is a 24/7 nearshore content marketplace that means we can be highly responsive for our clients, delivering global flexibility while using technology and AI to deliver absolutely robust quality control for them. And a nice example of a brand we all love that is probably thriving quite nicely at a time when we're not allowed out to go to the gym is Peloton. As their digital agency of record, we're tasked with developing a huge amount of content to help customers along that funnel, along that purchase journey. So, for example, recently we did a 3-day shoot, which resulted in thousands of video assets, thousands of static assets. On average, by campaign, we're developing 280 unique assets, all designed at delivering a highly personalized, highly relevant experience across the journey to target customers in that messy middle that we talked about, where they're making purchase decisions in a really impactful way. And you can just see a snapshot of some of that content, a snapshot of those thousands and thousands of assets we were able to generate off a single. So the last C we're going to talk about, and we're very nearly done talking and very keen to hear questions, is culture. And this is really important. Now more than ever, it is vitally important that brands align themselves with the changes and the shifts that are happening in culture. And our Isobar Good practice is dedicated to helping brands solve social problems and engage with social problems through the lens of design thinking. We work with businesses and we work with NGOs to identify their social impact story and to make that story real through our unique sprint-based methodology, a methodology that's got collaborative problem solving at its heart, very similar to our Now Lab approach, but it applies that spirit of innovation and of rapid problem solving to urgent social problems in the world. We've got real expertise in this space across sectors, and we have a unique methodology. So we aim to get to the root cause of the problem and enable genuine change, not simply comms or kind of empathy. And we work very successfully with vulnerable communities, multi-stakeholder businesses, because our approach is absolutely designed for collaboration and co-working. And we've got a really nice example here of something that we've done using artificial intelligence and image recognition to make a real difference in the social space. So wastewater is a huge problem around the planet, and a challenge that businesses face is that it is very difficult to clean wastewater without using harmful chemicals. And the reason businesses have to use harmful chemicals is because they can't analyze the water quickly enough to apply gentler, more natural solutions like adding, for example, a naturally occurring bacteria. What we did was to work with a major plant in the Nordics to use AI and a simple mobile app to photograph the water, capture an image, and identify the problem, and then identify a much more natural, much gentler solution to providing clean water. So we took the process of analysing samples from weeks to minutes and absolutely transformed the way that organisation approached the problem. So a really nice example of design thinking and for good. Okay, so we are in the home stretch. We're wrapping up. In summary, everyday experiences have been absolutely transformed by the age of COVID-19. The roles of on and offline channels have been upended and inverted, and the virtual world we now find ourselves in creates a whole host of unmet experience needs. How do I try on clothes remotely? How do I sample makeup remotely? How do I test drive a car remotely? How do I check into a hotel and feel the warmth and the affinity that I want from a Marriott in a contactless world? The good news is that a host of exciting new experience technologies are opening up really interesting new possibilities in that space, whether that's enhancing the online experience or mitigating the risks and challenges of the physical space. And the CMO sits at the absolute heart of the business that's undergoing this kind of radical transformation, bringing together brand and experience, belief and behavior, and creating that really seamless connection between the business and a rapidly changing cultural and commercial landscape, really building that spirit of collaboration and holistic brand thinking across the C-suite. And all of that, we think, places renewed emphasis on the importance of creative experience, so putting innovation, ideas, and creativity alongside the customer at the very heart of your CX thinking. So that is it from us. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I know they're both very precious at the moment. Very happy now to take some questions if there's anything you would like to ask Dave or myself about the study or some of the examples or cases that we've shared.
And Pat, there's actually a couple of questions that were submitted. I'm going to tackle this first one because I think it's actually, there's two here that I think are quite interesting. So let's just jump into this. There's a question that was submitted that talks about online versus offline. Where should brands be investing? Should we be keeping some skin in the game in offline retail or completely shift to online only? And I think this is a great question. And I think this is an easy thing to answer. Right now, people are hesitant, but have a lot of desire to get back into the physical world, right? We cannot fathom a day when we never return to some sort of normalcy, but we do realize and have to acknowledge that normalcy is unknown. What will a year from now be? We do not know. So right now, investment in interactive online experiences, ways to bring that physical experience to the human beings. But when you're designing those, you have to think about longevity. You have to think about long-term scale. So how can you design digital experiences that go from a purely offline world, or online world, sorry, to a hybrid approach where maybe I can use some of that digital content, digital experience in store, so perhaps through kiosks, through mobile. Someone also mentioned, like a stream of consciousness across this, that they go for walks and they go window shopping because that's really what their entertainment is in a world where they can't go into the store themselves. Will we see a day where my mobile phone becomes my transaction and salesperson, but I can still showroom by viewing things in person? There's going to be all sorts of interesting patterns that develop just like the patterns that have developed because we've all been forced into our homes for a long period of time. As we start to make our way back into society and start to integrate more, we will have to come up with solutions that are these hybrid online, offline things before we get to a point where the new normal is solidified and we understand where we land. So I think it's a little bit of both. Do not give up on the fact that we will return. We can do this and we will do this together.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's right. You know, even those businesses where we're seeing, you know, a real uptake and a real surge in online sales, a lot of that is being fulfilled through the physical stores. So Best Buy, for example, have seen a huge acceleration in online commerce, but that is fulfilled by people kind of doing curbside pickup and things like that. So even the online transactions are enabled by a store. And that will continue. And as Dave said, you know, we will be back, but I think we'll be back to more of a hybrid model, certainly for the short term. And the great news is a lot of people have made their first digital transaction over this period. You know, that the number of people who for the very first time have done their grocery shop online, or for the very first time have used things like click and collect, it is huge. And that's a behavior that will start to establish itself and will persist.
So Pat's, another question that came in is that is there an industry that could be doing more in the virtual or online space? Hey, listen, you asked me that question. There's always more we can do. But how can they change or get started and reap the benefits? So you don't need to go crazy. This is as simple as leveraging what has become a standard format like 3D, right? Now Apple and Google and companies like, there's a company called Eighth Wall that makes a web-based platform for augmented reality. Just being able to allow simple interactions like allow someone better product information by making a 3D view or an augmented reality view on their phone seems quite high tech for consumers and for some small brands, but it's really not hard to implement. So things like that, but also leveraging, you know, this is all about reducing friction for the consumer, making consumers feel comfortable and safe, and finding ways to use technology as that middleware, right, between the brand and the consumer. The biggest opportunities, I think, again, go to those high touch sales situations. And this is everything from putting new siding on your house or finding a new roof to buying a car, to looking at your options for high-end appliances, jewelry, furniture, things where it's hard to necessarily visualize what that's going to look like when you try it on, right? Excuse me. And so we look at ways to use those particular visual emerging technologies, computer vision, augmented reality, some advanced uses of mobile 3D content to create those merged reality kind of experience or mixed reality experiences. Then we have things, chatbots, right? Chatbots are going from a chat one-on-one human being to consumer experience now to a bot, right? Which is canned answers based on what you typed, to now AI and machine learning driven bots that can actually act. This is not going to stop or slow down. So you can see a future where, imagine your business as a service. I can talk to that bot as I can talk to a human being. It passes the Turing test. It feels really real. And then that becomes less about being a bot or a one-on-one interaction and of being your company as a service and information as a service. That gets cooked into all sorts of other types of experiences. So I mentioned KFC. One of the things that we had done when I mentioned the relationship being tight and then trusting us to bring innovations to market was actually a robot in store that could take voice orders from citizens from all different dialects across China and translate them into the dialect that the person taking the order would understand, because that's a real situation in China where there's so much change and people moving from rural areas to populous cities. And so imagine that same kind of bot experience, but being knowledgeable about everything. So we've all had that experience in a hardware store where you walk up and ask someone a question and they have no idea. Imagine always getting the right answer, and maybe that answer being customized to you because we know about you as a person. So we take all of the data that we're using for online personalization and experience, and we move that into these hybrid kind of physical experiences where information and data power that experience. The other place I think is fascinating, where there's so much movement and it's accelerating faster than anyone imagined, is this idea of real-time rendering. I'm not going to go too deep into here, but look that up. We're talking about using things like the Unreal Engine or Unity. These are game engines traditionally that are used for video game development, which are now being deployed in filmmaking. We take filmmaking and we extract that from the theater and we start to think about video. And so you will see a day and age not too far from now, you will start to see these things emerge where you're watching a video, but that video is actually software. You can interact with it. A quickest example, the car crashes into a building and there's an explosion. For Pats, the explosion is small. For Dave, the explosion is big. I can customize the content in the film based on my preferences or data. As a marketer and as an advertising, groups doing advertising and reaching consumers, the possibilities are endless. And so we're super excited about that. A little further off, but these are places where there's going to be a ton of movement in digital experience.
Yeah, for sure. I think I saw another question, a great question is what's the advice for FMCG brands where you're disintermediated from the customer experience? It's a really great question and we get asked it a lot. I think what we have seen during the pandemic is a lot of FMCG accelerate their direct-to-customer offerings, whether that's L'Oreal, P&G introduced a kind of hygiene bundle, if you like. Prior to that, we saw quite a few of those brands experimenting with sustainable direct-to-consumer models through things like Loop. I think what we would always say is direct-to-consumer can be a really interesting play for brands that have typically been sold and disintermediated through third parties, but you need to think about the value add for customers. So for customers to come directly to a brand, there has got to be a service layer and a service proposition that differentiates and makes that more desirable than going via the supermarket or going via Amazon. So brands like Nurofen, for example, some of the other Reckitt Venkisa brands are building that service relationship through things like connected thermometers, which provide you a kind of ongoing tracker of how your child is faring and how their temperature is performing. So those kind of services, I think, build that direct-to-consumer relationship, and they provide that data stream that you can then apply to your wider e-commerce activities, because often that is the real challenge, not having that real-time data on your user. And that is one of the great benefits of direct-to-consumer. It's not always the biggest volume play in your arsenal, but it is a great source of data. Any other questions? No. Oh, okay. Great. Thank you all so much for your time. Very much appreciated. You can find the link to the full survey and all the results on our website. We also have a lot of that data broken out by vertical, by market, which we're more than happy to dive into if any of that additional analysis would be of interest. So thank you so much. Good afternoon, good evening, good night, and stay safe. Thank you.